Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to speak about this number of how we got to 320, where we were before, and what that trend line is, because I think that's.
Well, as the sheriff was discussing when we opened the current jail in 2003, the individual that we used to determine those numbers, basically, today we're seeing exactly what he projected. So he is the one that we used. He took those same projections, and it's based solely on what's going on here in Minnehaha County, what we're seeing for inmates, the trends, it even gets down to males versus females in jail and that kind of stuff, because that all starts to take a big piece of this and to understand what our size needs are. So when he looked at this, he did a 5-year forecast a couple of years ago, which in 2018 showed that we would need we would have 468 of our own prisoners, which equates to a total jail bed need of 550 inmates, because you have to put a classification and a peaking factor in there. And what that means is, you may have a housing unit that can house 16 females, but you only have 12 females. So there's 4 beds that you can't use. And it's all kinds of scenarios like that. If you come in for assault and he's here for murder, we can't classify you together, especially if you're a first-time offender, some of those types of things. So it takes all of that into account when he decides what our needs are here. And so we took those projections. He projected out 20 years, and he's saying by the year 2033, we're gonna need about 753 beds here. When we got into some of the discussions about, do we continue to house federal inmates? Do we continue for Lincoln County and all that? Or do we just look at our needs here in Minnehaha County? That's how we went from the original 400 bed plan, which would take care of our forecast here, down to 320, saying maybe we only look at Minnehaha County's needs, and the day we open, if we have extra beds, we help out Lincoln County, we help out the feds, but it slowly dwindles like it's been doing now. And so that's, some would say that, what do they do nationally? But we think because of the judicial system we have here, the charges we have, the laws we have here, we're better off focusing on what we're actually seeing here than maybe what even Omaha or some other community is doing.
Yeah, and you brought this up about how there's more programs. And like I said, I've had friends who've participated in those programs, and you're getting less people in jail and out of the work release program. And like you said with your projections, I know that the state, and I've been watching the legislature, I think they're getting more and more progressive when it comes to, and even the governor, when it comes to the nonviolent offenders. Let's get them in some programs so we don't have to have them in jail. And the other thing that Jeff Barth brought up to me, Commissioner Barth, was this issue with people who need psych evaluations, and they have to sit a week to 2 weeks in jail waiting for this evaluation, which is in my opinion is a waste of jail space, because all they're really waiting for is a psych evaluation, but we're making them sit here for 2 weeks waiting for this. And how does that affect the psych evaluation, for one? But and
maybe
there's other.
She can give me an example, a recent example, without getting into who it is or anything, but a recent example of this is more than a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Obviously here in Minnehaha County, it's not just our jail bed needs that we have. Our court systems are full. It's difficult to get in to the judge, to see the judge, because they're getting so full as well with the number of crimes that are happening here in our community. So some of the things that take place is people need competency hearings, or some of these other evals that you're talking about. If you need a competency, if they need to see if you're competent, at times they need to send you to other facilities like the Human Services Center in Yankton or what have you. You go down there, you get stabilized maybe on medication or whatever it is that they feel you need, and you get back here, and that population, at times we see them resistant to taking their medications, or you're put back in now this facility where you're waiting to go to trial and you're nervous about it, and by the time they get you back into court on the docket, you may not be competent anymore because you haven't taken your meds or you haven't cooperated or whatever. And then we see at times they go back down maybe to the Human Service Center, you know, and in that whole time, they're in limbo and we have to have the bed space when they come back here. And we have a number of people that find themselves in that situation or waiting for a psychosexual exam. Like the sheriff said, there's only so many people in the community that can perform those as well. And there's a cost that comes to that too. So everything kind of comes back to kind of this backlog of everything that's causing us part of the struggles that we're having.
So it can be months and over a year for those things to occur. It's not weeks, it's long periods of time.
And have you ever had any issues with, obviously, you run the sheriff department and they have the police department. Have you ever had any issues where not a deputy, but a Sioux Falls police officer or several officers bring in someone and you say to yourself, why'd you guys arrest this, or isn't that the jailer's,
No,
you
not
kind of
really.
like, that's not really
No.
their job, or?
But you know, quite frankly, there are some things that we're looking at. Michelle chairs our Criminal Justice Advisory Committee and formed a new committee under that's about pretrial services. And it's co-chaired by two people. One he was the assistant chief, but now the new police chief, Matt Burns. And then the other one is Judge Hoffman, who's been real active in the JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. And they are starting to look at some of the things that we've been discussing for about a year and a half now, in fact, discussing with the governor's office. One of them is the use of a risk assessment instrument, or a RAI, for determining whether somebody stays in jail or not. Across the nation, that is the trend. A classic, I would say, one of the models that is utilized is it's through the Arnold Foundation. So if you get a chance, take a look at the Arnold Foundation or speak with someone from them. Very encouraging. We've actually, with the support of the governor's office, the chief justice, myself, the state's attorney, the presiding judge, and others, we submitted a request to the Arnold Foundation to consider adopting Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls as a pilot program for their risk assessment instrument. What that means is, today we operate under a fixed bond system. If you're arrested for a particular charge, let's say you and I are arrested for the same charge, and our bond is set at $5,000, who gets out, whether you or I get out or both of us, has nothing to do with risk. It has all to do with your access to $5,000 or $500 cash and surety. The use of a risk assessment instrument changes that entirely. And what it does is it provides the first initial appearance judge with a packet of information on you that would say, here's the criminal history, and there's a scoring mechanism. And there's a criminal history, there's background, there's your history with the courts as far as appearing in court. And all of these things are scored, and it gives the judge a number which really rates your risk to society and allows that judge to make a decision then based more on risk as opposed to whether or not you have mom in town that's got $5,000 or not. And we've seen cases where people on very serious offenses get out of jail and walk free because, parents had access to even millions of dollars.
The case that was just recently
so-
got,
Yeah, so it's our current system is how much money do you have to be able to get out, and and granted, the level and the expense or the bond amount is set. The judge takes those things into consideration. The judge has much of what happens in a risk assessment when they determine bond, but this actually gives them an objective number that says, look, here's the real risk this person poses. They haven't failed to appear. The charges may be a little more serious than what, the bond would have normally been higher, but the person's always shown up for court if he needed to. Its criminal history isn't bad at all. Has good connections in the community. Willing to be on maybe twice a day monitoring, whatever. So it's really promising. There's a best practice. I think we'll see. I hope we're going to pilot this, and it's occurring in other places in the country, and it's occurring very successfully. There's other things like cite and release, and that would be taking a group and involving citizen representatives as well, and looking at what what offenses in our jurisdiction need to really come to jail? Are there certain offenses that you should receive a summons and be released at the scene? And so there's a lot of jurisdictions that have changed in some of them. For example, in Omaha, they book into jail about the same number of people annually as we do in Sioux Falls. And they're substantially larger. Now their running jail population mirrors, what the population of Omaha compared to ours. But that booking process, they use cite and release a lot more, and that's because the Nebraska legislature passed a law that said on lower risk offenses, they're really all cite and release unless you can articulate a reason this person really needs to be held in custody. And so I think this group, this pretrial group is looking at that. And then the last thing of the pretrial group that I think is important is they're looking at pretrial services. We don't have pretrial services in this county, which would mean that if a judge decides to let this person out, because the risk assessment said you could probably let him out, but on a level of supervision like electronic monitoring, that the judge would have a pretrial department out there somewhere run by the court services or a nonprofit or the sheriff's office or somebody that would be able to monitor that person, and if they violate it, then take them back into custody. So those are really cutting edge justice reform that's occurring across the nation that we're really looking at.
I like those ideas. Number one, the progressive hippie in me likes them because it's a quality issue. You're not, what you said, we're not setting a bond, we're setting a risk assessment. It doesn't matter how much money your mom has to come in and bail you out. And, but the fiscal conservative in me likes it because it saves the taxpayers lots of money. As we're saying, we're letting you out, we're not spending taxpayer money jailing you, and we're gonna give you a chance. And I like that too, because, you gotta admit, there is probably a lot of people that get arrested because they drank too much or something like that, and normally they're not that, they go to work every day, they're a normal person, they're not a violent person, they did something stupid, and you look at their past record and you say, well, he doesn't usually do stuff like this, so we'll let you out. You still gotta go to court, you still gotta pay for your crime, but we're giving you a chance to stay out of jail until you get convicted of a crime or not. So I do like that idea. Trying to think of.
One of the questions we were playing with because we're both real involved in city politics and the things that happen in the city, and
Now wait a minute, now Del Rapids, Crooks, Colton.
well, I was in Valley Springs yesterday.
I work with a lot of cities.
I was in Brandon and Valley Springs yesterday. So let's say you have a problem in Valley Springs.
Okay, Valley Springs. Okay.
And and they might have a transient population that seems to need to go to the jail because they've been imbibing too much during the day, and at 3 o'clock.
We stop him there too. This is a rumor that's going around. That's why we're asking you.
Yeah.
This is a rumor that we've been hearing that on Friday afternoon, and like I said, it's a rumor. We don't know anything.
It starts
more
at a
about,
certain day at a certain hour.
And at Friday afternoons or early afternoons, there's a roundup downtown of the transients by the Sioux Falls Police Department. Now, I have never seen any proof of this. I've never seen any police arrest at that time of day or whatever. But with the Van Amp Park situation and the Heritage Park situation, and I guess. You don't have to say anything.
Well,
you don't want to,
but
do you see a lot of transient arrests on Friday
drunken
afternoons
disorderlies
or Saturday afternoons, or is it obviously on the weekends you're gonna get more anyway because more people are drinking?
Yeah, I certainly, we hear rumors too. I haven't really seen that to be the case. I know that there are times where they focus with saturation patrols, whether that's in car or with their bike officers in the downtown area. We do fill up on weekends, but that's oftentimes because it's Friday night, Saturday night.
While drinking.
But the reality of sweeping through downtown, I guess I haven't seen that that's the issue, and quite frankly, those people are really not the people that are crowding our jail. They're, you know, we've quite, you know, if you look at city ordinance violations, the clerk, or the courts now have made city ordinance violation. Now that, this coming from the presiding court, city ordinance violations are PR bonds, so they don't, I mean, they don't even, if they went to jail, they're just immediately released. But here's what happens with that. Because we do have a rotating revolving door, and I'll give you an example why. We are in line right now to book 20,000 people into the Minnehaha County Jail this year. 20,000 people, so that's over 10% of our population in 1 year. So that tells you one of two things. Either we have a very disorderly group of citizens that lives here in general, or we have some people that are frequent flyers, and we have a group that are frequent flyers.
Yeah.
Well, when those people are booked in, so let's say that they just write them a ticket, bring them to jail, and it's a, you know, public consumption, failure to vacate, whatever it may be. What happens though is they fail to appear. Now it's a warrant.
Warrant.
Now they're coming to jail for failure to appear. They're gonna stay in jail until they see the judge, because the judges take very seriously somebody who thumbs their nose at the court and says, I'm not gonna appear in court. So some of our revolving door people do stay in over the weekend, because not only did they get picked up for drinking again, you know, in public, wherever, or failure to vacate, but also there's a warrant because they failed to appear. So sometimes they hold us in jail for a weekend. Usually, if, you know, of course, if they're picked up on Thursday, they're in court on Friday, and they're already out of jail by the weekend, because what the judge will do normally in those cases is give them credit for the day they served and lets them back out. We have that group of people. I will say we have a group that's a little more intensive, that commit a little bit more serious offenses. Oftentimes, they have co-occurring disorders. They've got alcohol or drug addiction, and they've got mental health issues. We have a program called Alliance that is actually operated out of our Human Services Center. Carrie Benz supervises that. And they meet with the jail, and they weekly, and they meet with not only the jail warden, but also mental health staff. And they talk about who's about ready to get out next week, coming back into the community, that we could, you know, do some intensive case management with, to try to keep them from coming back.
Because they come back all
Yeah,
the time.
and it really works, but there are other promising things happening in other states and other jurisdictions that we're watching. For example, in Minnesota, they have what's called assisted outpatient treatment. So if you have somebody that is on head meds, let's say, with mental health issues, and when they fall off them, they really deteriorate quickly, but they don't really need to be in jail. Jail's a horrible place to be for people with just mental health issues. So with assisted outpatient treatment, they literally are supervised to the point that they make sure, the police in Minneapolis or Hennepin County Sheriff will make sure that that person shows up weekly to get their medication or whatever, and they'll go check on them to make sure, because when they're on their medication, they're fine, and they stay out of jail, and they stay out of victimizing, keep away from victimizing people. So there are promising things out there. Here's what happened. I mean, and people who follow you understand this, but in the 1960s and 1970s, there was a sweeping change in mental health reform that deinstitutionalized hundreds of thousands of people and returned them to the community, as opposed to keeping them in the Redfield State hospitals of the world then. And we're feeling the pain of that years later. And for some, it was very necessary. But what happened is, when they deinstitutionalized all those people, it saved them tons of money. That money did not follow those people. The money and services did not follow them at the level that it needed to. And if you talk to any mental health providers in our community, I think they will all tell you that the people with mental health issues in our community are underserved. And I can also tell you that nationwide, probably the county jails and prisons in the U.S. house probably 10 times as many severely mentally ill people as are in state hospital care. It's really changed. It is a struggle. Suicide is a leading cause of death in jails in America. And it's not because regular people are killing themselves, it's because people who are struggling with mental health issues are ending up in jails because there's not, sometimes because there's not sufficient care for them on the outside, or there's not a mechanism to make sure they're continuing their care while they're free and working and active in our community, so it's a huge issue.
I was a big proponent of the safe house, and one of the main reasons I was a proponent of it was the cost savings, and you know, I told my friend Kermit Staggers, who was opposed to it, I said, Kermit, don't look at this as you're helping an alcoholic drink. I said, when you look at this, the amount of money that taxpayers are saving by keeping these people, like you said, instead of in jail, or instead of on this rotating, getting out, causing problems, getting back in, back and forth. I said, we're saving money because it's been proven to work across the country, and I think it's done a great job.
What about, like, Chief Boyd is involved in drug court and has been since its inception.
Yeah, we have a drug court and a DUI court, both stood up here, and then they're attempting to get a vets court, and then there's talk about a mental illness court. But what we find is, instead of these people spending all this time in jail, like we talked about waiting to go to the pen or getting a longer jail sentence, we put them on these programs where they have to follow all of our rules and guidelines, and we have judges and the state's attorneys and public defenders, law enforcement, treatment, counseling, everybody working together to try to give you the best chance you have at being sober and living a healthy life while you're with your family, your friends, getting a job, you know, and be a productive member of society, and hoping that ultimately, obviously, you can stay clean and sober, or the amount of times that you come back to jail getting in other types of problems, you have those connections made, and kind of learn some of those things that you didn't learn when you were, you know, when your brain needs healing, and you didn't learn some of those things when you were younger, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Bring that up, and
I like the, and not to interrupt, but I like the vet idea, and the, because as we all know, there's a lot of vets coming back from the current wars with
Right.
lots of issues.
Right.
I'm looking, you know, at things from when I was much younger, and you know, in the 1960s, and the Rockefeller drug reforms that they had at the time that were actually very vindictive, very harsh, very cruel laws that were put onto the books to criminalize more people. And that mentality kind of permeated on through for, you know, several decades, that we have to, instead of rehabilitation, we have to criminalize, and we have to take retribution when it comes to any kind of a crime. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that now we may be turning the corner, at least here in Sioux Falls, where you guys are looking at ways to get people back into daily life.
Try to deal with that root cause, you know, the addiction issues, and I think one of the things that, and you have a lot of people that listen to you as well, and I think one of the things is drug court, DWI court, veterans court, all those courts are very intensive on volunteer time. And I know they're always looking for mentors or people who would be willing to step up and say, I want to take somebody under my wing and try to make them better and get them back and productive in society, and get them back so they're a good mother, you know, a good parent, you know, good worker. You talked about the growth of our community, and you know, it's so hard to find good employees right now in our community that it's hard to bring new businesses here because you know, all these growth. And so people who are in these drug court, you know, fortunately here, it's pretty easy to find them. You know, an employer, our employers have been real good about hiring some of these people who have addiction issues, just because there's a shortage of employees. I always wonder what it's like in cities like Detroit with their unemployment rate, and how hard it would be to deal with people like that when it's hard to follow up with a good job. But here with drug court, DWI court, you know, our employers are very supportive of that. You know, we for the mental health side, the Stepping Up initiative that Phyllis Ahrens and NAMI are trying to bring to deal with mental health issues. You know, the Face at Sioux Falls. I mean, there's a lot of people that are in this trying to make it better. So I'm encouraged with these courts, because they really provide an opportunity for somebody with a felony charge to walk away, you know, clean and sober, and not with that criminal background. And so, you know, I'm encouraged, but it needs volunteers.
I've been meaning to talk, I haven't talked to him since he got appointed judge. Gordon, who used to be assistant, it's Gordon Swanson, I know Gordon, and I haven't talked to him since he moved to Mitchell, but I know that he's got he does a drug court up there. And I've been reading some stuff about it, so I've been meaning this, next time I go to Mitchell, look him up.
He's a
He always
good guy.
says, he always says look him up, but, and see what he's doing with that.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on.